Good day, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're viewing this program from. I want to welcome you to another broadcast of Pitch Deck 101. In the case you're wondering what Pitch Deck 101 is all about, Pitch Deck 101 is a company, and we have started this operation largely based on the fact that we are seeing many persons struggle to access capital, and even when they access capital, they struggle to exit that debt portfolio. So part of what we do, we work with businesses, both persons in the U.S. and foreign nationals. We help foreign nationals to get set up in the U.S., and we also help them to access capital regardless of where they're set up in the US. We're able to bring funding to businesses to about 50 states in the United States between the partnership that we have with multiple institutions within US. So that's just a little snapshot into what we do at Pitch Deck 101. In closing on Pitch Deck, what I want to say, we work with clients not just to help clients to understand financial instruments, meaning debt, equity, credit, smart capital and creative financing, and hard money lending. But we also work with our clients to help them to understand how to access, how to leverage, and how to mitigate debt. Today I have in the studio a subject matter expert, and he also specializes in finance. He has over 13 years experience as a financial specialist, and his name is no other than Anthony. Anthony is one of our partners, and today we have done a lot of business in the US helping businesses to get their EIN, their ITIN, get their business registration, and get them properly set up in the US. But just before I get into today's interview, permit me to give you a little background to Anthony. Anthony holds a BA and MBA in finance. He has an MS in security and analysis and portfolio management. I can see we did some similar studies. He is also licensed as an IRS enrolled agent. He's a certified acceptance agent. He's a NY life insurance broker and also a NYS notary public. My God, you have a whole lot there stacked up, my friend. I want to compliment you, for really, bringing up, building up your credential, so
Thank you so much.
you're a valuable asset to the public. But that's not all, Anthony. You have over 13 years experience in finance, financial control, business, tax advisory services in the United States of America. My God, hats off to you.
Thank you very much.
All right, there, Anthony. I want to start the first question. I mean, what is the scope of responsibilities within the ambit of a tax advisor?
So, thank you, Gary, for the nice introduction. A tax
You're
advisor,
welcome.
as far as I see it, is a catch all phrase. So, a tax advisor would help a client accurately prepare tax returns, which is extremely important. Um, Tax advisor would help a client legally minimize their taxes. Uh, in the US, there are many, many rules, and there are plenty of avenues in order to get your tax liabilities as close to zero as possible. And part of the work of a tax advisor is to apply the tax law accurately to help minimize that tax liability as close to zero, if not to zero. Um, the third part of being a tax advisor, for those that do have the additional training, would be to help taxpayers that may have a problem with the IRS or a state and local tax authority. So, a tax advisor, it's a broad term for an expert that can help in all areas of the tax law.
Interesting. And Anthony, I must say, from our first conversation, I was so impressed with your knowledge of tax related issue that right there and then, that decision was made that, hey, we have to collaborate. We have to establish, how we can, work to add value, bring value to businesses. And I'm truly impressed with the work that you have done over the period that we have been working. So, based on everything that you were saying, I'm absolutely certain that you are credible. You are passionate about what you're doing, and you are results driven. So I'm truly impressed with that experience I would have had with you over the window we have established and that relationship.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Welcome, my friend. Um, the next question I want to pose to you is, what are the differences between IRS and state laws and state taxes?
Well, the United States being the United States, we have to make everything very complicated. So there are multiple levels of administration in the U.S., and each level of administration needs to fund itself. So therefore, in the U.S., you will be levied taxes and you will pay taxes at a federal level, which would go to fund the military and border security and healthcare for seniors and things of that nature. And then at the state and local level, you would have another layer of administration and another layer of taxation. Um, Through income taxes, I live in New York City. In New York City, we get taxed on our income at both at the federal, state, and local level. New York City also levies an income tax. And then we have additional taxes. We have property taxes. We have sales and use taxes. Um, Depending on your activity, there are also federal excise taxes. So they really get us coming and going, so to say. But the biggest difference is just that every level of administration needs to collect funds in order to administer to the community, and therefore, depending on what their job function is and what they're trying to take care of, they will tax us at that level. In most states, you'll get taxed at the federal level and at the state level on your income. And then most people will, not most people, everybody pays property taxes to their local jurisdictions. And then they also, when people go out and shop and they consume, they'll also pay sales taxes at the register. And that'll help fund the communities.
Got you. Now, let's get a little bit into business and business registration. There are multiple types of businesses that you can register in the US. You have the LLC, you have the C Corp, you have the S Corp, just to name a few.
Mhm.
What are the major differences between these different types of business models?
Okay. So the main difference would come down on the taxation side. All three, the C Corp, the S Corp, and the LLC, they're all legal entities which will allow for limited liability um, when you conduct business. Um, the corporate structure allows for separate taxation, and furthermore, it would allow for double taxation. So on a C Corp, the entity is separate and distinct. One thing I didn't mention is that all of these legal entities are all governed by state statute. So every state has different rules governing their corporations and their LLCs. Um, to be a little more specific, all corporations, when they're formed, are C corporations, meaning that they're taxed separately from their owners. And then if the company distributes profits to the shareholders, those shareholders would then be taxed again on their personal income tax returns in the form of dividends. They would have different tax rates depending on what their total income is. The LLC is a newer version of a limited liability entity became popular. I believe Wyoming was the first state to enact an LLC law in the 1970s, 1977, I think to be exact. And then most states followed. Um, this is where things are a little bit different. So an LLC is considered a pass-through entity. So what I mean by that is that all of the income is not taxed at the entity level. All of the income would pass through to the owner's personal tax return, and then they would get taxed at personal tax rates, which historically have been lower than corporate tax rates. Although now with the Jobs Cuts and Tax Act of Jobs, yeah, TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, excuse me, of 2017, corporate tax rates have come down in the U.S. to 21%. So believe it or not, if you have a higher level of income, that pass-through income may be higher than the corporate rate that you would pay. And I'm sorry if I'm going on, and I know this is a very
That's okay.
complicated
It's okay.
issue, but
It's okay.
suffice to say, without going into too much of the history, before there were popularity in LLCs, the IRS, and before the LLC, the IRS in the 50s allowed for a subchapter S corporation. So basically, the LLC and the S corporation are pass-through entities. The income goes onto your personal tax return. The C corporation is taxed at the entity level, and then if distributions are made from profits to the shareholders, then they would be additionally taxed as dividends.
Okay. I recognize that you would have identified a number of differences between the LLC, the C Corp, and the S Corp. But I want to go in just a little deeper for you to identify tax advantages and disadvantages when we look at each one of these legal entities.
Okay. So I touched on it briefly in the previous question. And unfortunately, I get questions like this all the time. And it's very difficult to give an exact and a correct answer because everybody's tax situation is very different. Um, what I would say is that if one of your viewers is thinking of forming an entity to do business in the U.S., they really need to sit down with a competent advisor and put it all on the table, so to say, so that way they can pick the most advantageous form. Really, what I would say is just on a very superficial level, for the C corporation, the advantages basically come down to limited liability, coupled with the fact that if you are not a U.S. tax resident, because the corporate form is well known throughout the world, um, you will not probably be taxed on all of the income that comes through the corporation. And depending on if the U.S. has a tax treaty with the country that your clients or your viewers may be in, um, they may be able to pay a lower percentage of tax on that dividend income. Unfortunately, the disadvantage to the C corporation is really the double taxation. But like I said, there's foreign tax credits, there's reduced rates on treaties that can help minimize taxes on that second layer of income. Things become a little more complicated with the LLC. In the U.S., the LLC is, like I said, it's governed by state statute, and the tax law is more developed. Uh, in other countries, they don't recognize the LLC. So a foreign member of an LLC may be taxed on all of the income at once because foreign governments and foreign tax authorities don't recognize the LLC like we do in the U.S. Um, and for a foreign shareholder, the S corporation is kind of a moot point because an S corporation cannot exist with a foreign shareholder. That corporation would then revert back to being a C corporation. So if you have foreign shareholders, your options are the C corporation and the LLC. If you have somebody who's living out of the country but they are a U.S. tax resident, the LLC, the all three options, the C Corp, the S Corp, and the LLC, are open to them.
Great response. And I'm absolutely certain that we cannot exhaust all that we want to talk about in one session. It's
Correct.
very deep. But
It is
the
very deep.
objective here today is us to give an introduction to tax related issue, to business related
Sure.
issue, to reach some of the existing clients that we have and new clients that we are going to be appealing to give them that assurance that we have the knowledge base to help them to mitigate their business, you
Sure.
know, dreams and aspiration. The next question that I want to put to you, you spoke very briefly about foreign nationals. How important is the SSN to doing business in the U.S.?
So, in the United States, there's three main identifying numbers. There's four actually. One of them doesn't really serve a purpose to our discussion today. Um, but in the US, for an individual, your main identifying number would be the Social Security number, the SSN, or the individual tax ID number, the ITIN. In business, the EIN that you had mentioned is kind of like a social security number for businesses. And it's extremely important because that's your identifying number. So, as a business, whenever you file a tax return, that number is going to be on page one of that return. If you were to open a bank, on the application for the banking product, they will ask you for the EIN number, excuse me. So that way, if they paid out interest, if you have, let's say, an investment product and they pay dividends, at the end of the year, the institution's required to report all of that income to the IRS, and they'll do so on that number. So the rule of thumb is if you don't apply for an EIN number right away, it's okay. But at some point, every business has to have an EIN number, so that application has to be made.
Awesome. So the alternative for foreign nationals, because they definitely will not have the SSN immediately, they can move towards the EIN and the ITIN.
The EIN, if they're opening a business, yes. And if they are not eligible for a social security number, they can apply for an ITIN, correct?
Got you. Um, what are the benefits in starting a US based business? From your point of view, what are those benefits?
Well, I've had experience doing business outside of the US, uh, mostly in Eastern Europe. And I can tell you that there's many differences. And the way that I see it in the US, uh, it does have tremendous advantages. You have a large marketplace, so there's a huge demand for goods and services. There really is a big bread basket that we can all share from in the US. So that's definitely a big plus. You have a relatively safe banking system that is insured, and you also have a Federal Reserve that is, for the most part, up until recently, been very accommodative. There's easy access to capital. If you are trying to expand the business, you have access to financial markets where you can raise capital through share offerings. And for me, the biggest plus is, for the most part, uh, the United States has a very strong rule of law and has a relatively efficient legal system. So if there is ever any dispute in business, you can take your dispute to court and it should be resolved relatively quickly. I will use this example. I'm very familiar with doing business in Greece. And in Greece, there really is, there's a very difficult legal process to go through if you have a dispute, with many disputes taking 10 to 15 years or longer to be resolved through courts. There's really no system of arbitration to mediate a dispute outside of a court. So, for all of those reasons, I feel like the United States, there's a lot of pluses. the big market, the financial system, the banking system, and then also the legal system, you're able to transact business relatively easily. So that's why I would recommend anybody open a business in the U.S.
I have to agree with you. I came out of a meeting only yesterday with the SBA, and one, they represent a wide cross section of the business community. Over 32.5 million small businesses are registered with them. But what I like about how they operate, they have a strategic game plan. And once you're in their database, they provide the strategic intervention, not only access to capital, but access to markets and a range of different things is how they function. And that definitely is a plus to doing business in the US.
Sure.
The icing on the cake that you did mention is access to capital. That's one thing that I like. You have access to debt, equity, credit,
Yes.
creative financing, and hard money lending. So you have
Sure.
the financial mix to your advantage. Coming back very briefly to the tax, some of tax issues, and we were at the last two questions.
Mhm.
What are the tax seasons in the U.S.?
So, of course, like I had said before, the U.S. being the U.S., we have to complicate everything. So, for most people, that would be filing a U.S. tax return the 15th day of the fourth month after your accounting period ends, which for most people, accounting period ends on December 31st. So by April 15th of the next year, excluding holidays and weekends, would be your filing deadline. Um, People, U.S. tax residents outside of the U.S., get an automatic 2-month extension, so they would have until the middle of June to file their taxes. On the business side of things, your pass-through entities, the LLCs that are taxed as partnerships and S corporations, their tax returns are due a month before the individual filing deadline, so March 15th. And C corporations are the same as the individual tax deadline, April 15th. And then, of course, if you need more time to file, and remember, it's an extension to file, not an extension to pay. You have to pay by the 15th of April. Um, you'll get a 6-month extension without any pushback by the IRS. So that could bring you to October 15th to make sure that your filings are timely filed.
Great response. All right, in case, just for the viewers, in case you're now joining us and you're wondering who I'm interviewing, I'm talking to Anthony. He is a financial specialist with over 13 years experience in this field, providing financial business support, tax support to businesses. He is a part of our team, and you can judge for yourself. Listen to how we articulate himself around the subject matter. He knows what he's about. I can also testify to that. He's a knowledgeable person in relation to his field. So, in the event that you're thinking of coming to America, setting up your business in America, we can get you set up. And as Anthony would have mentioned early on, there are so many benefits. We can set you up in business properly, ensure that you're submitting your tax on time before the due date. We can help you integrate your brand into the market. You have over 300 million persons that you can position your products and service in front of. Along with this, we can help you get access to capital throughout the 50 states in the United States of America. So do remember to connect with us at pitchdeck101.org. Just log on to that website, pitchdeck101.org. Uh, Study what we are doing, make contact with us, and we are happy to have one of our team members speak to you and help represent your brand. Anthony, we are now at the last question. How important it is to keep on top of bookkeeping and tax filing?
It's very important. And it's important for different reasons. So, bookkeeping is part of the accounting process. And basically, for your viewers that aren't familiar, bookkeeping is taking all of your financial transactions and putting them in one place so that you can see and you can measure the progress of your business. So usually what I'll tell people is that if they're not keeping proper books and if they're not updating their books, it's kind of like a pilot that tries to land without a landing chart for the airport. It's very easy to crash and burn. On the tax side, it's very important
I
to
love how you
find.
make that. You put that. Do you mind repeating that again? I love it.
Yeah, no, proper bookkeeping, updated bookkeeping on a monthly basis, it will it'll keep you moving in the right direction. It'll allow you to keep yourself on a good path to see if your business is profitable, to see where there's problems so that you can take intervention before it's too late. And it really the bookkeeping to the accounting process, like I had mentioned before, it's akin to a pilot that tries to land at an airport, and that accounting process is their landing chart. So if you don't have the right numbers, you could end up crashing. So it's a very important part of the process. Um, the other thing that I just wanted to mention on the tax side is it's very important to file and to submit accurately prepared tax returns. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen people either not file because they feel like, you know what, I don't want to, or I'm not really that big of a business. It's okay. I don't have to. And then they'll end up getting a notice in the mail that says, well, since you didn't file a tax return, we filed one for you. And they're not able to take advantage of any of their deductions. They're not able to offset any of their income. And then it becomes a real issue. The other part of that is not only will they tell you, the IRS or the state and local tax authorities will tell you, hey, listen, you owe us this tax. But then on top of it, they'll say, oh, well, you know what? You didn't pay on time. So now the tax debt will snowball in penalties and interest, and it really becomes like a minefield. So it's relatively painless to file. It's painless to find somebody who's knowledgeable to do the bookkeeping. So for all of those reasons, I would recommend everybody have at least at the very least a competent bookkeeper, if not an accountant, looking at their financial records every month, then talking with them and helping them to formulate a game plan to keep themselves in financial health. And then also every year, it's so important to make sure that you're filing your taxes on time.
Well said, Anthony. And I just want to add a few more nuggets to what you would have said. You know, access to capital is very easy in the US, but bookkeeping and paying your tax is going to help you tremendously.
Yes,
You step out to interface with private equity investors. They want to look at your historical
of
financial
course.
data. And if those things are not in place, it's going to create barriers to you accessing to capital. So I
Sure.
really trust that you enjoyed Anthony's presentation, looking at financial matters in your business. And again, I want to encourage you to reach out to us in the event that you need any tax support, you need your business registered, you need in the US, you need access to capital. We can give you support to access funding, regardless of where you're in the US, over 50 states. I just want to, in the outro, I want to start where I begin. And so you have a backdrop on Anthony. Anthony is a subject matter expert. He holds a BA and MBA in finance. He holds also an MS in securities analysis and portfolio management. He is a licensed IRS enrolled agent. He's a certified acceptance agent. He's an NY life insurance broker. So in the event that you want a life insurance, Anthony is the guy to talk to. So reach out to us at Pitch Deck, and I'll definitely put you in contact with Anthony. He's also a NYS notary public with over 13 years experience as a financial controller, business and tax advisor service provider in the US. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just listened to Anthony. Anthony, I must say this is a pleasure talking with you today
Likewise.
on
Thank
Pitch
you.
Deck, and we have to do this again soon.
Sure. That would be great.
Awesome. So I'll catch up with you in the back end and we'll talk some more. Thanks again for your
Sounds good.
time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, my brother. Goodbye.
Bye bye.